Hey guys. So just gonna go ahead and proceed with my lecture on World War I, and just go ahead and get it posted up there. So if you guys want to see it as early as today, or wait until Friday, that's okay too. Um, so um, yeah, just want to make sure that you guys are uh, getting everything done on time. I know that I've looked at a few of you guys and looked at kind of what y'all are writing. I'm reading some of y'all's papers. um, they're okay, um, but at this rate, if you guys ever go to college, I would recommend that you guys use a writing center to help critique you on several things. I know that my juniors as well have had, we've had a lot of grammatical issues and spelling errors and punctuation errors and things like that. So just make sure you guys are paying attention to that. I'm not going to be an English professor and try to nitpick you on every little thing. But do know that if you guys go into the higher levels, you need to be able to write pretty legit papers, and if you're going to do that, you need to start practicing even now. Also, make sure you guys are getting your papers in. I would recommend a little bit earlier than the due date. I know that, especially my juniors, I've had several of them start writing papers and sending them in, just a few of them. And this allows me to kind of read them, look at them, figure out, hey, you're on the right page, you're not on the right page. And this is to their advantage. It gives them a chance to kind of go back, fix any mistakes they've made, get back on the right page before they turn it in. Because if you wait till 6 o'clock on Friday, there's no help for you at that point. What you got is what you got, and what grade you get is what you're gonna get. So that's your chance to ask questions, get a better idea of things. So just make sure that you're not waiting until the very last minute to turn those things in. Also, I wanted to touch base with you guys on your first assignment, which was the kind of analyzing the charge of the Light Brigade. And I know you guys are not here in front of me, but I've noticed that not many of you guys have really gotten the answer on stanza 2 when they're talking about the mistake that was made and the 600 men are going into battle despite this mistake. It's not the 600 men who made the mistake. The commander made the mistake. And that's one of the reasons why the poem is kind of this romanticism and hailed the way it is of bravery in the midst of everything, is because the soldiers, as the poem points out, the soldiers know that the commander made this mistake, but they're still going to charge forward with honor and glory and all that kind of stuff. So yeah. So if you didn't know, now you know. So you got your assignment that I gave you on Wednesday. Just kind of talking about how would you compare or contrast the two poems, like the Suicide in the Trenches. But with that, let's go ahead and get started. So Germany is increasing U-boat attacks at this point, and this, after the U.S. is like, yo, bro, calm down. This is kind of irritating the United States. And in 1917, the British intercept a message known as the Zimmermann Telegram, because it was written by the German foreign minister, Arthur Zimmermann, to his ambassador in Mexico. And the letter basically says, if you guys can attack the United States and kind of keep them busy, that when this war is over, we'll give you back the territory that the United States took from you. Well, when the United States finds out about this, they are really mad. And so they declare war on April 1917. So now Germany's like, crud. So Germany decides, okay, we got to come up with another plan. The U.S. is about to get involved, and we're about to be in a whole heap of trouble, because the British and French forces' morale was getting low. They were getting worn down. German forces were getting kind of worn down. They really didn't want to deal with a fresh military jumping onto the scene. And so they come up with this all-out attack, and they actually push the Allies back about 40 miles. And kind of as your video on Oversimplified points out, is that the Germans continue to use resources and men to try to push the Allies back into a position where they can kind of win the war before the United States gets there. But this continues to exhaust the German troops, exhaust their resources, and the Allies get more and more dug in as the Germans go, and it just continues to wear them down, or wear the Germans down. So it doesn't work. The Americans show up, and they're actually able to push the German forces back. And in 1918, you really kind of start to get this sense that the war is about to be over. And it really is in just a matter of months. So with the Americans coming onto the scene, this is a big boost for the Allies. It's a financial boost because America had made so much money by selling to the British and the French during the war that they were in really good shape to fight a war. So President Wilson comes up with this idea in January, and he says, "Look, I want to try to create a method for peace, and it's called 14 points." Now, included in this are his freedom of the seas, basically just free trade, unimpeded trade, and large-scale reduction of arms. Basically, everybody just kind of stops building militaries up. Into secret treaties, because that's kind of how Italy got into the mess that it got into. Allow Eastern Europe the right of the people to choose their own form of government, and this kind of becomes a little bit of a problem. But and then lastly, it urges the creation of a League of Nations. So today we have the United Nations. At the time, they were thinking of it League of Nations, and the League of Nations, as you'll see when we move into World War II, is completely useless. They don't do anything. They don't stand up for each other like they promised they would. It's hogwash. So, at this time, kind of as 1918 kind of plays out, everybody's kind of tired of this war. It's been going on for 4 years. Nobody's done anything. You had Russian revolutions that had broken out where the Russians literally just drop their guns and walk away. You had uprisings exploding in Germany that got so fierce that the leader, Wilhelm II, actually had to step down and flee into exile in the Netherlands. Austria-Hungary was reeling toward collapse as more of their ethnic nationalities started revolting. And this new German government that comes up kind of says, look, we need to find a way to get peace. Wilhelm II kept trying to fight. We need to find a way to get peace. And so what happens is there's an agreement on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. That's kind of what they say, or the saying is the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 11 a.m. November 11th. Now, interesting little tidbit here is that there's a gentleman named, and you'll need to know this, Henry Nicholas John Gunther. One name. He is the last casualty of World War I, an American. And the armistice goes into effect at 11 a.m. At 11 a.m., everybody's kind of watching their clocks. At 11 a.m., everybody's done fighting. Well, at 10:59, old Henry Gunther pokes his head up, and a sniper shoots him and kills him. So, literally, within a minute of the war being over, he gets killed. And he's the last casualty of World War I. Kind of unfortunate, really. So, the aftermath of this war, everybody thought, oh my goodness, that this was an absolutely catastrophic loss of life. You had a total of about almost 10 million people killed, almost 21 million wounded. And just to put this in perspective for you guys, the total amount killed was more than the entire state population of Mississippi, Arkansas combined, plus about another 2.5 to 3 million people. So, and if you combine the numbers of the total wounded and total killed, you're actually looking at a population higher than the state of Texas. The state of Texas in the last census had a population of about or expected to have a population of about 28 million in 2019, and you're basically looking at there's more people that were killed and wounded in World War I that live in the entire state of Texas. So pretty crazy. In fact, more people died than live in the entire city of Houston, and Houston, I believe, has like 6 or 8 million people now. So, and the devastation was made even worse by a flu pandemic. Kind of weird that we're talking about this at the point when there's a coronavirus pandemic, but in 1918, everybody was like, "Yay, war's over," and then the flu shows up and it kills another 20 million people. So this has kind of turned out to be a pretty dreary period in human history, with just in a matter of 4.5 years or so. So the Allies decide they're going to get together and they're going to meet at this Paris Peace Conference to discuss what's going to happen with the Ottoman Empire. They've collapsed, and the various German colonies around the world. What's going to happen? Austria-Hungary is now falling apart, and so really, there's only one country left standing out of this to blame. And so, with this Paris Peace Conference, and this is not the last time you'll see this, the Allies meet, and they don't even include the Central Powers or Russia. They basically say, this is how we're going to divvy everything up. You get this, you get that, you get this, and no one includes the bad guys, if you will. And this kind of throws the Central Powers back, like Germany. An armistice, guys, is not a signing of a surrender necessarily. It's just a sign to stop fighting. The Allies couldn't beat the Germans, and the Germans weren't beating the Allies. So it was just a stalemate. Nobody won or lost, and that's the way the Germans saw it. But the British and the French saw it completely different. Now, President Wilson pushed forward. He said, look, we want to have this peace without victory. Here's my 14 points, etc., etc. But a lot of the other allies, like the British and French, they really kind of get annoyed by Wilson pushing for this, because the Americans were only in the war for almost maybe a little over a year. And again, if you look back at the losses that they had sustained, you're looking at 116,000 killed, 234,000 wounded. But if you look at France, who lost 1.4 million and had 4.2 million wounded, it's kind of like, bro, stop talking. That's kind of the way they felt. Like, you haven't even done anything. Like, you haven't been through anything that we've just been through. So shut up. And the French leader actually is quoted with saying that Mr. Wilson bores me with his 14 points. Why? God Almighty only has 10. So, yeah, Wilson really wasn't well received in the Paris Peace Conference. So, now, this is kind of how everything starts to shake up after World War I. It's a little bit problematic. I think the Allies didn't expect for everything to kind of explode and all these countries to kind of form out of this the way that it did. But they kind of sat by and let it happen. So out of Austria-Hungary comes Czechoslovakia, Austria, the country of Hungary, Poland, and Yugoslavia. Also out of some of Germany comes some of Poland. But you also have Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia that are gonna show up as well. Now, if you look at this map on your slide, you see the map of 1914. You see the map of 1923. If you notice, Germany is kind of split in 1923, and this is actually going to be a reason for why Hitler, in almost 20 years later, is going to come after Poland, because he's trying to unite Germany. So, yeah. Now, the Treaty of Versailles is really almost the last slide, pretty much the last slide that we'll talk about today. There's one more, but it's basically just a picture. So in June 1919 is the Treaty of Versailles, and it forces Germany to assume full blame for causing the war. And Germany is kind of like, wait, what? If you remember, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. We just jumped in there and helped them because we were allies. We didn't start a war. But that's not the way the Allies saw it. So the pensions that the Treaty of Versailles covered was that they were going to have to pay for the destruction of the war, destruction caused by the war. They were going to have to pay for the pensions of the millions of Allied troops and their widows. And this actually totaled about $2.7 trillion in today's money. Germany was not allowed to build a military force of infantry more than 100,000 men. They could not have an air force, tanks, submarines. There's no way that you could actually defend yourself. If anybody wanted to attack you at that point, there's nothing you can do. You have no way of defending yourself. Everybody else has tanks. Everybody else has planes. You're basically going into a gunfight with a knife. It's just not going to happen. And they're going to return the Alsace-Lorraine to France. I mean, that's kind of what France wanted, that territory that was highlighted earlier in your slides. They removed an additional hundreds of square miles from western and eastern parts of Germany. The Rhineland was going to be demilitarized, and that was part of Germany at the time. And so it also stripped Germany of all of its overseas colonies in Africa and the Pacific. So this was just an absolute humiliation for Germany. Now, Germany had no choice to sign. But if we talk about this when it comes to sports, guys, about being a sportsman, not trying to run the score up on your opponent, not trying to humiliate them, because eventually the day is going to come where they're going to try to get you back. And this humiliation that Germany suffers in this treaty is it kind of creates this poisonous climate for 20 years. And for 20 years, the Germans are having to deal with this. They remember it. It's kind of a thorn in their side until a former World War I decorated soldier, by the way, with 2 Iron Crosses, which is kind of like our Silver Star and Medal of Honor, decides to take it upon himself to return the humiliation, bring Germany back to greatness, and his name, as most of you guys will probably guess, is Adolf Hitler. So with that, World War I is basically over, and we'll move forward on getting you guys ready for a test next week, along with an additional assignment. When we move into World War II, that is going to take a lot more time just because there's so much to discuss in that. So with that, guys, make sure you get your assignments turned in. Hope you guys have a good weekend, and let me know if you got any questions. See you.